Namaskar. I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all our viewers. Most parents dream of having a gifted child. Now for parents, these are typically children who are talented, who have many qualities, and ideally, who are also well behaved. But what if a child was spiritually gifted? And this means that from birth itself, they have an innate connection with God. How do we identify and nurture such children? At the Maharshi Adhyatma Vishwavidyalay, we have found that such spiritually gifted children are being born on earth in greater numbers. And to inform the world of this exciting and unique divine phenomenon, we have created a documentary series called Divine Children. Now the term divine child was coined by Paratpar Guru Dr Athavale as a way of identifying children who are being born on earth from the higher, positive, subtle planes of the universe. These children are really special because they are born at a higher spiritual level, and this is because in many previous lifetimes they have dedicated themselves to spiritual growth. So come join us in this series where we will explore and understand this phenomenon and what it means for the world. We will be taking you into these children's world, and we will explore how they think in an elevated manner, how they gravitate to a spiritually pure lifestyle, and how they can understand the spiritual dimension through their sixth sense. These children are destined to lead humanity spiritually, and apart from their own spiritual growth, they will also work towards the spiritual upliftment of society. So in our studio today, we have Dr Shriya Saha from Kolkata. And just to share with you a bit about Shriya, well, of course, she is a doctor, but she also graduated with honors and was amongst the top of her medical class. She is currently pursuing her postgraduate residency in dermatology from the Medical College and Hospital in Kolkata, India. But today, we've not called her to ask her about her medical profession. Today, we have asked her and requested her to join us in her capacity of being a divine child. Shweta, Clarke from our research team will be interviewing Dr Shriya Saha, and we will be going back with her into her childhood to understand this divine child's journey from childhood to adulthood. And in doing so, we aim to gain an understanding of her approach to life.
Namaskar Shriya, it is so nice to meet you again.
Namaskar.
So Shriya, when did you come to know that you are a divine child? You are a divine child now also, it's just that you are grown up now.
So this happened when we met Param Puja for the first time in 2007. I was 12 years old at that time, and I remember that my mother was telling him that sometimes she doesn't understand how much to spend on certain things, that she thinks she's a bit too thrifty. And Param Puja told her that you don't ask her, and he said that pointing towards me. So my mother told him that I am even more frugal. I don't have any demands. I don't ask for anything. So Param Puja said at that moment that is she a divine child?
So Param Puja told you that you are a divine child even before the concept of divine children was introduced at the Spiritual Research Center in Ashram. It is so amazing. Personally, I am so happy to be interviewing you, Shriya, because I have been always fascinated by this spiritual concept that divine children from higher subtle planes of the universe, they come down. Because most people outside feel that heaven is the ultimate. That is where people go in their afterlife. But there are regions beyond that also, and kids coming from there, it's absolutely amazing for me. Shriya, I wanted to start by asking a little bit about yourself. Basically, now you are in your 20s now, but for our viewers and audience, we wanted to understand like how it was to be a divine child growing up in your childhood, in your teenagers years. We wanted to understand like how do you think and how do you interact with the world around you?
So, I would start by telling a little bit about my family. We've always lived in a small nuclear family. I have an elder sister who is 6 years older to me, and she's a plastic surgeon now. My mother used to be a teacher, and my father was in central government service, who has recently retired. And because my father had a transferable job, so we moved from place to place every few years.
It must have been very difficult, no? Because changing school, changing friends, location, not to say the least, like house also changing. So, how did you handle that?
Actually, come to think of it, it is usually difficult for people to move from place to place and settle at a new place all over again. But somehow we didn't find many difficulties doing that. We could adapt easily. So, yes, we did move from place to place every few years. We changed schools, made new friends again at a new place. But somehow I realized that I didn't find many difficulties doing that. I could adapt easily and it came naturally. And I think because of this, because we moved from place to place every few years, I never got much attached to a certain place or the people around.
So, this itself gives an inkling how divine children are. They don't get attached to people or worldly things, and actually, they make the best of every situation that God puts them in. So, Shriya, let's go back to the recollections about spirituality and how you connected to God. In fact, if you can tell your that experience which your mother said about your birth.
So, my mother tells me that when I was in her womb, even though I was slightly overweight, my birth weight was over 4 kgs, but still she didn't experience any pregnancy related sickness. And she also tells me that before my birth, they went to a Devi temple, a temple of goddess Durga, where a seer told them that during my birth, Devi Ma will be present in the room for 40 minutes. And as a matter of fact, when my mother underwent a cesarean section for my birth, the surgery continued for 40 minutes only.
My goodness. So this actually, this we have heard from so many parents who have had divine children, that they experience a different kind of divinity when they are giving birth to a divine child. In fact, especially the mother, they experience that after a divine child is born to them, that their spiritual purity or sattvikta increases manifold. And this is what happened in Dr. Shriya's case also. So Shriya, what else did your mother tell you about your childhood?
She tells me that when I was a baby, I used to be affected by negative energies. So sometimes I would cry all night long. Now, crying babies is not a new phenomenon, but my mother understood that it was due to negative energies because when she would remove evil eye, then only I would become quiet.
So it's very nice that your mother realized the importance about removing evil eye. Of course, she was a seeker, so she understood the spiritual background. And means that we have heard from many parents also at the Spiritual Research Center and Ashram, we have seen that negative energies attack divine children to impede their spiritual growth or bring about obstacles in their spiritual journey. So, Shriya, what about as a toddler? Did your mother tell you anything about that part of your life?
So, my mother tells me that as a toddler, throwing around objects or breaking toys, dismantling things, this was never seen with me as with other kids my age. And I would often play quietly on my own, I would not disturb others. And I also had a habit of keeping my things very organized. And in fact, that skill has even continued now. I would organize my files in folders or organize the files on my phone or computer. So that has always been there.
So, this shows that divine children have innate qualities which helps them to grow spiritually and also to guide the world around them to grow spiritually. So, Shriya, did your mom tell you anything more about your talents or qualities which you displayed?
Before taking admission in pre-primary school, I had already learnt alphabet at home. And my school teachers would be surprised to see such neat handwriting, while other students, other classmates would have some scribblings on their notebooks. And this was also in drawing class. I was a fast learner there also. And I also used to sing and dance. So when my mother took me to music class for admission for the first time, I recited a devotional song to the music teacher. And she was surprised as how without any formal training in music, I have such command on the beats and rhythm. And I always liked devotional songs, but even when I would hear to Bollywood songs or English songs, I always tried to devote the song to God.
I am glad, Shriya, that you brought it up, like connecting the songs to God. So I wanted to ask you, how did you, that inner spirituality started to come out, like that connection with God, or how did you seek God?
Initially, when I was a small child, I was always drawn to Lord Ganesha. Before we met Param Pujya, out of all deities, I thought that Sri Ganesha is the one showering love on everyone. And we also knew that he is the Lord of knowledge and wisdom. So when we would sit to study, we would pray to him. So I found a very deep connection with him. I also want to share that initially I was inclined to Sri Ganesha, but after we met Param Pujya, so we connected with him more than we connected with any deity. That's what they call the guru-disciple connection.
So true.
And how we started, how we came to know about spirituality or the basics of spiritual practice. We were in Prayagraj back in 2002. So there we had a spiritual center. For the first time, my mother noticed the banner over there, and she had the curiosity to know what happens there. So she went to a satsang, and she was really influenced by how simply the concepts of spirituality were explained in the satsang. And the next day, she took us there. And then we started going to the satsangs regularly. Over there, we also had collective chanting sessions. So we would also attend that. And at home also, I would nag my parents to sit and chant or to make prayers.
I had this visual of little Shriya running around parents and nagging them to do more spiritual practice. Actually, it is so amazing that divine children, they become role models for increasing seriousness about spiritual practice. Normally, it's the other way around. Parents tell children to do spiritual practice. But with divine children, they lead that spirituality in their family, isn't it?
When we came to know about spiritual practice, I was only 7 years old at that time. I was quite young. But I used to feel that I am so lucky that I got to know about this now. My parents were in their 30s or 40s, but I felt really fortunate to have known this at such a young age. And in fact, when I got to learn about the basic concepts initially, the scientific approach with which it was explained, it was very nice.
It is only here that we learn the scientific approach, isn't it?
Yeah. And even at a young age, I didn't feel that it was too much for me or that these concepts are only for the old people to practice. And then in 2007, I remember, I watched an SSRF video, Live an Aware Life. So I always wondered since a young age what is the purpose of life, why are we born? And after watching that video, the concepts became even more clear. I had a lot of clarity after watching it.
So, this is another unique quality of divine children. From a very young age, they keep on searching about the true purpose of life, or they have these spiritual concepts or questions in their mind. Until they get that answer, they keep searching for it. So, Shreya, you mentioned that you met Param Puja for the first time in 2007. So how did it help you in your spiritual practice, or how did you feel when you met him for the first time?
When we met him for the first time in 2007, I was so awestruck with his divine presence that I didn't know what to talk to him. I didn't have much to speak. And I also felt that he has told us so many things and we don't even practice that. So, what more we should ask him?
This shows the spiritual emotion that Shriya had towards Paratpar Guru Dr Athavale. Like she was introverted at that time because he has asked her so many things or already told so many things. So, what more to ask? She wanted to practice what he had asked her to do. Shriya, can you share in what ways spiritual practice benefited you?
I think after meeting Param Puja, that meeting somehow sowed the seeds of sadhana, of spiritual practice in me, in the subtle. And when I was a student, I realized that compared to my peers, I would have comparatively much less stress during exams. Or even the environment at my home was also quite different. At other homes, the parents would be more stressed when their kids would have the exams. But at our home, our parents didn't even know when we had exams. We would go and give the exam, and we would also collect the results ourselves.
Usually in households I've seen like most of the children are in stress or parents are in even more stress during exams. So it's so unique of a divine child like you, Shreya, that you had no stress absolutely about your exams.
I also want to share that I felt a really, I felt a sense of inner peace that I never thought that we need to ask for anything from God. So usually when people would visit temples, they would ask for something, or when children would visit temples, they would ask for things like clothes or fancy clothes or toys or for good grades. But I never asked for anything from God because I thought, what if God has better plans for me? And if I ask for something less, then that would be my loss. So I really never asked for anything.
It is so amazing these divine thoughts that you get. How many people think like this? This only divine children can think like this, truly. It's so much to learn from your efforts and the thoughts that you have, Shreya.
My mother also shares that I have always been very content with whatever I had. I would never ask for clothes or toys or throw tantrums for anything. And even when we would go to a market, so they would ask me, what do you want? And I would say, no, I don't want anything. I already have everything. And in fact, my parents used to call me Sadhu Baba in my childhood. Sadhu Baba meaning a sage, because I preferred a simple lifestyle.
It is so amazing what Shreya said, that God has better plans for me, because normally we don't accept God's plan or we feel that it should be as per my wish. But for divine children, they always go as per God's plan. They trust in God and their swecha or like things should happen my way is very less in them. Shreya, there is a principle in spirituality that likes attracts like. And given that your lifestyle, so was it spiritually pure or sattvic, or were you drawn to a sattvic lifestyle?
Talking about my lifestyle, I think there's a lot I learned from my parents, even though I haven't quite mirrored their qualities much. So I remember ever since childhood, they would have a very strict routine. They would wake up early in the morning, they would exercise daily, and they were always very punctual, not wasting any time. So they had all these qualities. Even they were also very strict about the diet. My mother ensured that our food was nutritious and sattvic. They would always discourage having fast food or cold drinks or eating outside much.
So you never had any cravings for these outside fast food?
Never really. No.
It shows your divinity, no, Shreya?
So earlier we used to have non-vegetarian food at home. It was like once or twice a week. But then eventually, as we practiced spirituality, our frequency automatically reduced, and then we completely stopped cooking non vegetarian food at home. Although when I was pursuing MBBS, I was in the hostel. So there I continued having non-vegetarian, as getting proper vegetarian food was not possible over there. But I realized that as my efforts for sadhana increased over the past 1 to 2 years, I realized that every time I had non-vegetarian food, I would experience some distress. I would feel heavy and I would get a headache, or distress of some physical distress I would feel. And that ultimately resulted in adversely affecting my spiritual practice. So now I have completely uh,
Given up on
given up
non-veg.
on non-veg.
So Shriya, it came naturally to you, or like gradually you felt like I don't want to eat? Isn't like did it
Yeah.
happen that way?
Yeah, I don't think I had to make a strong resolve to get uh, to leave the non-vegetarian food. I think it came automatically.
So as the spiritual practice grows, then the spiritual purity increases, and this has been the experience of many divine children. That as they grow and more in their spiritual practice, that desire from inside is only not there to eat non-vegetarian food, and that is what happened with Shriya. And also she was experiencing at the vibrational level, like she mentioned that she was feeling heavy and she didn't feel like eating non-vegetarian food.
Also, all throughout my childhood, only for a few years we had a functional television. So at school, my peers would be discussing about some soaps or cartoons, but I never felt that I should also watch those. And my parents always encouraged on playing outside or indulging in sports rather than watching cricket matches or football matches on the television. So even now we have a television at home, but it's only a wall hanging.
This is so amazing, Shriya. Like in today's times, most of the children, parents have to tell them to stop watching television, and for you, it was just like a wall hanging and not watching television.
Since I was a child, my sister and I also used to help mom and dad with some household chores. So when we were younger, we would be given duties like dusting and cleaning and things like that. And when we grew older, we used to help in kitchen also. So my mom and dad always made it a point to discipline us in such a way that we would not spend our leisure time watching the television or playing video games like other kids. So we had fixed time for leisure activities also. Another thing which I learned from my mother was using things very judiciously, using resources judiciously, like saving water, saving electricity, fuel. So my mother was very particular about these things. So since childhood only, I was also quite thrifty. Like I would not waste things. I would not like waste water while brushing my teeth, or things like that. And also I had this habit of collecting small things, like for craft projects or something. I would collect small pearls or embellishments. I would collect craft papers from here and there, and then I would make things out of it. I also remember that I used to make small purses from different materials for my dolls. Other kids would buy toys, but I would prefer making them out of waste. Now, there's another fact that I'd want to share here. And this quality actually extends on a spectrum of being a divine quality to being a defect. And that's my obsession of perfection and symmetry. So, be it making a rangoli or a greeting card, a handmade greeting card, or a PowerPoint presentation, or even my handwritten notes, everything had to be perfect. So, in my notes, if the lines would not be parallel, or if the margins were not perfectly straight, it would give me unrest. And I wanted everything to be absolutely perfectly aligned. The colors had to look okay. So I was very particular about those things. And I think whenever there was some imperfection in any of my projects or whatever I was doing, So I felt that it is not emitting positive or sattvic vibrations. This obsession of perfection, this extended to such an extent that even while cutting vegetables, I made it a point to cut every piece at accurately the same size. And there's another thing, when I was in 8th grade, we had the option of opting a second language, which should either be Hindi or Sanskrit. And usually, most students would find Sanskrit difficult. But I found it very enjoyable learning and reading Sanskrit, and I would score well also. Even learning new things or new skills, it came quite easy to me. Like, I never had any formal training in PowerPoint or designing posters, designing digital posters. But I just, with some practice, I learned it on by myself.
We did this Sat Seva with you, and I also experienced that you collate your thoughts very well, or the way you present something, it has a lot of clarity, or even the PowerPoint presentation that you had made was really very nice. So, this shows the uniqueness of divine children, how they are always drawn towards a sattvic or spiritually pure lifestyle, and they refrain from spiritual impurity. Also, our spiritual research has shown that Sanskrit is one of the most sattvic or spiritually pure language. In fact, when we read or we write Sanskrit, then there is a very positive impact on the aura of the person who is reading or writing Sanskrit. And on this, we have research papers also. So, Shriya, have you heard about the personality defect removal as a step of spiritual practice? And have you put it into practice, or have you tried it?
Param Pujya always has given a lot of emphasis on practicing the personality defect removal process. And even though as a child I did not practice it, but my parents also always gave importance on developing good virtues and getting rid of our bad traits. So they always told us that becoming a good citizen, a responsible citizen, was way more important than only getting good grades and excelling in academics. My parents also encouraged us to speak openly to them, to not tell lies, and to seek help wherever we faced problems. And although they always guided us in the right direction, but they never imposed their decisions on us. We would also have the freedom to pursue whatever we want. And they never imposed anything on us. So my mother tells this about me, that when I was a child, fighting with other kids or quarreling, she never got this complaint. And that indulging in chit chat or gossip or speaking ill of others, complaining about others, so that was very less with me.
So, from the beginning only, there was this personality defect removal in an informal way. It started since your childhood itself. Like you mentioned, your parents always tried to discipline you, or means innately also you had many qualities. So, the PDR base was already there. And now, of course, you are doing formal PDR, writing mistakes, and that step of sadhana. So, Shriya, I would like to consider you a millennial. And as you know, nowadays, teenagers and people who are growing up, they are shaped by social media. They are always on the internet. So, and I believe there's intense amount of peer pressure also. So, how did your inner spirituality reconcile with all this going around you? Or did you succumb to that peer pressure, or you were able to hold back, or how did you manage this part?
So, just to give you some examples, as a teenager or even in college, I would see my peers, other girls, dressing up or putting on makeup. But I always found it a unnecessary waste of time. And I always felt very comfortable in my daily wear clothes. I realized, why should we spend unnecessary time in putting up fancy clothes and doing makeup? And I also felt that somehow I felt that I'm the best in my natural self. And when I would see others doing makeup, somehow I felt that they're not emitting positive vibrations. At a subtle level, I felt that there's some negative energy covering them. And even as a child, and even now, I prefer uh, getting plain colored clothes, not with any gaudy prints or embroideries. However, occasionally I would also have to dress up for some family functions, weddings, or occasions like that. But I realized that whenever I would dress up and I would put on makeup or wear some artificial jewelry, I would have some distress later. I would almost always get a headache which lasted for a few hours.
That much sensitivity you had. It's very nice.
I have been the smallest member of my family, but still, my parents, every time they had to make a important decision, they would ask me about it. And they would also feel that my viewpoint or my perspective was often correct. So, just to give an example, like sometimes we would come across some people who would show off a lot. So, in order to mingle with them, others in the family would succumb to doing things their way. But then I would tell them that we have lived a simple life throughout, and that's a quality we have, and we should be proud of that and not be ashamed of. So I would also always stick to my principles or whatever I have learned at home, whatever my parents have taught me. And I would not just do or say things to please others. I mostly had a trouble free childhood throughout, but it was not all good. Like in college or in school, also, sometimes I would have some rough patch with friends. So I would feel that they are leaving me out for no reason, or I wouldn't understand why they are not speaking to me. So at that point, I would come and pray to Sri Krishna and Param Puja that whatever happens with others, let me not be affected by it, and that you're only my true friend. So, whatever happens with other people, that should not matter much. And I realized that all other relations are just an illusion, they're just Maya, and our only true friend is God.
So you were able to experience and live it, no? This thought which Shriya shared, that the only true relationship is with God, it shows the deep connection which divine children have with God. And they are able to understand that all other relationships are futile or they are illusory. So, this is also a speciality of divine children. So, Shriya, studying for a doctor's degree is incredibly hard work. And you mentioned that, like, now your sadhana increased, or you are doing much more, spiritual practice, seva, and you got some spiritual experiences also. So, how did that transition happen?
So, when I was preparing for the MD entrance exam, I would say that was one of the most difficult times of my life, as the exams are very competitive, and I also had some, like my sister's wedding was there during the same period. So, I stayed back in Delhi with my sister during the preparation, as at home there would be a lot of preparations related to the wedding, so that would cause distractions. So even when I was with my sister, it was not all good. Like we had some problems or some distractions related to the wedding. But even through that period, I had a belief that God will take me through it. And because I was always throughout childhood, I was engaged in co curricular activities, initially singing and dancing, then art and craft, and I was also engaged in sports activities. So I wanted to take up a stream which would give me time to pursue other hobbies as well. I did not want to devote all my time for medical practice only. So that's why I wanted a light stream. And but actually, with my preparation, I really didn't think that I'll be able to get that. But getting dermatology proved to be Guru's grace only, as after the entrance exam, for the first time, I did not have any stress of exams, or for some time I didn't have any studies. So I had free time. And just because I had this golden period in my life, that I started devoting more time for my spiritual practice. With my parents' little push, I think my spiritual practice took pace. So during this period, I started taking out more time for chanting, for practicing the PDR process. And I also took up some sevas like translation seva or social media seva, and some other sevas like taking satsangs for young seekers. And after starting seva, the bliss I experienced out of it, I realized that I didn't experience this kind of happiness in any other activity. And then I enjoyed it so much that I took up more and more seva. And eventually, this was around June last year, when finally the time for admission into the MD course had come. And then I started thinking that now I won't have as much time as I had till now. So, how will my spiritual practice take place, or how will I continue seva? But then I surrendered to Param Puja that if my spiritual practice has to be done, then he will get it done through me in every situation. And with his grace, even now the sevas have not hit a halt and they are continuing.
So because you surrendered wholeheartedly, this happened.
So, this was a major spiritual experience I had, because if I had not gotten through the entrance exam, I would probably still be preparing for the exams and appearing for exams. Even most of my colleagues who were with me, they are still going through a stressful phase preparing for these exams. So, I feel very fortunate that Guru has got me through this.
Because of your intense desire that it has happened. So, Shriya, have you experienced any negative energy distress, or have you felt negative energies trying to attack you?
One major experience which I remember was experiencing sleep paralysis. So, this started in around 2016 when I was doing my MBBS. I used to reside in the hostel. So, there, like during the episode, I would also see some black shadows, some visions of black shadows, and someone trying to choke me or smother me. And it was very scary at that time, as there was no one else around me. But then, after a while, the episode stopped. And then, recently, like last year, when I started giving more time for spiritual practice, these episodes started recurring. And every few days, it would happen. So now, but this time, what was different was that it was not as scary as before. Now I felt that I had the spiritual strength to fight the negative energies. And I felt that Param Puja is holding my hand and I am fighting with the negative energies. Also, whenever such episodes would happen, my chanting would start automatically. And then eventually, in a few minutes, when I would come to my consciousness, I would play some stotra or chant and then go back to sleep. And eventually, when we undertook some spiritual remedies as advised by saints, these episodes also stopped eventually.
So now you don't have these episodes anymore,
No.
no? So, our spiritual research has shown that when seekers start their spiritual practice in the earnest, some of them have experienced sleep paralysis. But God is also there, and when they sincerely go on continuing with their spiritual practice, then they are able to easily overcome these episodes of sleep paralysis, as it happened in Dr. Shriya's case. Shriya, you are a doctor, and given all what you have, you can do anything that you would like. So, but and there are people your age also which who do things differently. So, how do you see that difference between how you go about things and people of your age?
I think most people my age would be planning their career or where they would start their medical practice, or they would think about their relationships and its future. But I would just not get any of those thoughts. And recently, one incident happened in my outpatient department, so I'd like to share that. So, what happened was that my colleagues were discussing after the MD, where they would open their chamber or where they would start their practice. And then one of my colleagues said that I just cannot imagine Shriya sitting in a chamber and doing her private practice. After that, a second colleague, he said that I think she'd be doing a government job. She would comfortably do her outdoor and then she would rest, or she would not give much time to this. And then a third colleague, one of my friends, he said that I think in 5 years' time, Shriya will be doing seva in the ashram. So even they have understood my inclination.
So wherever divine children are, their focus always remains on God realization. Your inclination always remained towards God realization also. And everything else took a second seat, no? Spiritual practice was always at the forefront. And then you were also declared 61% spiritual level. So if you'd like to share, how did you feel when the spiritual level was declared?
So it was only in March last year, March 2020, where my efforts for spiritual practice had accelerated. So I would start giving more time for chanting, for practicing PTR and sevas also. And it had only been 3 to 4 months. So when my spiritual level was declared in June last year. So only with this much efforts, Param Puja has taken me this far, and that declaration, that announcement was completely unexpected for me. And it was so overwhelming because I felt that my efforts are negligible. Only with His grace this has happened. So, really, I have not done anything to be eligible for that.
So did you notice any changes in yourself after reaching 60% spiritual level?
When it was announced that I've reached 61% spiritual level, I didn't know much about it, the significance of it at that point. So I started to read about it on the SSRF website. And then I got to know that 61% means that an individual is liberated from the cycle of life and death. Now, when I got to know about this, I started wondering, if I am liberated from this cycle, then what is the purpose of my life now? It's not just the professional duties that I want to fulfill, I realized. And then in the following weeks to months, my yearning for spiritual practice, for God realization, that increased many folds. And then I also started devoting more time for seva. My efforts for awakening bhav would also increase. I experienced more bliss while performing seva. And I also noticed some drastic changes in my personality. So, speaking to new people, or speaking to people for the first time, or speaking in public, that never came easy to me. It was not my forte. But then, when I got some sevas where I had to speak to some seekers or had to take satsangs, I realized that I am not the one speaking. God is only suggesting to me what to say, and I'm just the mic and He's doing the speaking.
So for a person who has reached 60% spiritual level, see, there are many other seekers who are aspiring to grow spiritually. So we would like to know, like, how do you connect with God from inside?
So ever since I was a child, I always felt that God is there with us and we need not worry about anything. So even though I never consciously made efforts when I was a child or a teenager, I never consciously made much efforts towards my spiritual practice, I always felt God's presence with me. When I was small, I would come across quotes like man proposes, God disposes, whatever happens, happens for the best. And people my age would probably not ponder much about it. But when I came across these quotes, I kind of believed it to the core. And that belief, I think, has always taken me through the ups and downs of life. And as you asked about how I connect with the divine, so I realized that after I started performing seva, I could connect with God even more than I would do as when I would chant or I would pray. So through seva only I felt the divine connection even more. Initially when I started seva, I would get the kind of seva which would be according to my skills, which I thought that I could do. But then sometimes I would get sevas which I just didn't have the ability to perform it. And when that happened, when I was able to do such sevas, I realized that the doer of my spiritual practice is Parampuja only. And that helped reduce my ego and my doership and surrender more and more to God.
So Shriya, recently you are at the Ashram and Spiritual Research Center. So did you have any spiritual experiences? And also I wanted to ask, like, see, you are a divine child, you have prior birth sadhana. So how do you see the ashram helping you in your further spiritual growth?
About the ashram, I think if there's one perfect place on the earth, then it's the ashram. When we visited for the first time, we were in awe of the flawless management. Everything is so organized. And the seekers, they were always like celebrities to me. They would be my role models. Whenever we would get some seva with the ashram seekers, I would always feel very elated and excited to do seva with them. And their preeti, their discipline, their relentless efforts and their focused efforts towards sadhana gave us so much to learn from. And I think staying in the ashram also, uh, like no other thoughts other than thoughts of spiritual practice, they stay in the mind. And that brings more focus on performing and intensifying our spiritual practice.
So you will come here for longer time, no? To stay in the ashram.
Hopefully, by Guru's grace.
So Shriya, do you think about spreading spirituality?
People say that doctors are next to God, that it's the most noble profession.
Yes.
You get to help so many people. But I realized that being just a doctor, I can only help the patients who visit my clinic. I can prescribe them some medicines which would give them temporary relief. But realizing that spiritual practice is the only way one can lead a blissful life, I think telling others about spiritual practice or encouraging them to start their spiritual journey, it would make a much, much greater and lasting difference.
So you're going to tell them, no, about spirituality.
I already try in my ability.
Shriya, do you think about the spiritual progress of others or how to make this world a better place? So any thoughts about that?
Whenever my friends, my colleagues or peers would face any problems in their life, whilst others would try to give them solutions at an intellectual level or an emotional level, I would also try to give them a spiritual perspective on the problem and give them spiritual remedies. So, I've realized that only if people realize the importance of spiritual dimension in their lives and they start practicing spirituality, their lives would become so much more easier and blissful. And by Guru's grace, I have realized its importance and I've been practicing it. I feel extremely fortunate for that. Whatever little I have learned till date, I do try to tell others. But most people my age, they don't listen to it or they are not in a state of mind to accept these things. But I think when they know that you're a seeker or you say that you practice spirituality, they observe your conduct. how you do things or how you behave with others. They observe that, and only if they see a significant difference, they can learn from it. So I think that's one important aspect which we need to focus on when we practice spirituality, to make one's own conduct ideal in order to make a positive impact on others.
To lead by example, no? So, Shreya, at this point in time in your life, how do you see your life going? Like your aim, your dreams, and what do you aspire to do further?
About my aim in life, even when I was a child, when my parents used to ask me, "What do you want to become?" I would just not have an answer. I would say, "I don't know what I want to become. I don't know what's God's plan." So I was like that. And even up till 12th grade, it was not fixed that I'll be pursuing MBBS, because my sister was already a medical student. She pushed me into it, and then I came into the stream. But since last year, since my efforts for spiritual practice increased, I feel that it's not just the professional expertise that I want to fulfill. After experiencing the bliss that I get from seva, and after realizing the importance of practicing and spreading spirituality, I think I want to contribute further to the cause, and I wish to follow God's plan, whatever He wants to get it done through me.
So, you will do more and more spreading of spirituality, no, in your capacity. And you have so many qualities also, Shreya. Gratitude, Shreya. It was really inspiring and insightful, like what you have shared. So, people watching this interview, they'll be so inspired to do spiritual practice. Namaskar.
Namaskar.
We really hope you enjoy this interview. And if there are any parents amongst our viewers who feel that they may have a divine child, then our earnest request to you is to embrace this precious gift and nurture it. Do follow our channel, as we will be constantly publishing more and more documentaries, articles and content about divine children and how to develop and nurture them. Namaskar.